Hi, everybody. My name is Lindsay. I'm 15, and I am, how should I put this? Well, I'm in love with my brother. Stepbrother, of course. Why? What did you think? This story began when I was around 11 years old, and my stepbrother Jaden was 12. He is 1 year older than me. Well, no, actually, at the time we became a family, but everything actually started before that, when Jaden's basketball flew over our fence and, it's an awful memory. It landed right on my doll table in the middle of a tea party. Oh, my beautiful pink tea table! Overturned, breaking my adorable tea set on its way. That tea set could have been the envy of the British Queen. My friends, even if they were just my dolls, were very angry and upset, and refused to stop by for a cup of tea after that incident. And finally, my beautiful dress that made me look like a real princess was all covered in mud. It was at that very moment that I found out Jaden existed and realised that I didn't like him, to put it nicely. We were neighbours. Our two families shared the same townhouse. My parents and I lived in the left part, and Jaden's family occupied the right one. We were separated by a tall fence, which for the children looked like the Great Wall, but it was not enough for me. My little heart had room enough for a huge grudge against our neighbouring bully, so I would have been happier if I never saw him again. But this was not possible. Our parents decided that they could be more than just neighbours and became friends. They would visit each other every day. They barbecued together and did all that boring adult stuff. Thank God they didn't insist that Jaden and I became friends too. Jaden probably wouldn't have minded playing basketball together. But can you imagine me with a ball, huh? And also, I did not even want to talk to him. It was not only because of my childhood trauma with the ruined tea party, but also the fact that my parents brought me up as a little princess, and I reckoned that it just didn't suit me to play with the neighbourhood boys. No way! But everything changed drastically when I turned 11. Jaden's parents died in a car crash. My parents did not share the details with me, and I'm not sure I should have known them. It was enough that Dad put me on his lap and looked into my eyes seriously and attentively. At that moment, I thought that I must have done something bad and was frightened that he was going to scold me. But he just said that he had to tell me something. Our neighbours were not with us anymore, and their son Jaden was left all alone. Dad also told me that we had to help him, and he was going to stay with us for a while. At that time, I did not realise what a tragedy had just happened. I just thought, why should Jaden stay with us if he has his own house? But I was so glad that this serious talk had nothing to do with my behaviour, and just nodded. Jaden got a separate room, but I braced myself, thinking he would bother me. But I hardly saw him. He was very quiet. He barely talked, and he spent most of his time in the backyard playing with his basketball. Later on, Mum called for a very serious talk. It turned out that Jaden did not have any relatives in our town. Actually, the only relatives he had were very distant and lived on the other side of the country. So my mother started to prepare me for the decision that she made together with my father. My parents decided to adopt Jaden. Oh my God! My parents managed to settle all the formalities, and Jaden stayed in his room. The other half of the townhouse would stay closed until my stepbrother reached adulthood. Yeah, I had to get used to the thought that now I had a stepbrother, which I could not stand. You see, I was the only child in the family, and it had to stay this way. It might sound selfish, but it was my parents who brought me up with the idea that I was their only beloved girl, and they were not going to have any more children. And suddenly, I had joined a serious competition in a struggle for my parents' attention. And I couldn't even begin to forgive Jaden just because he was my age. It made me mad. I was not ready to share my home, my family, or my life with this guy. My parents, of course, tried to care about Jaden and protect him. They didn't forget about me totally, but I still felt bitter, like I was being neglected. Anyway, I grew up and gradually I got rid of these prejudices. It didn't mean I started to treat Jaden with sympathy. I just basically didn't notice him. For a long time after his biological parents died, my stepbrother could not get over the fact that he had adopted parents. He became completely aloof for a few years. Only the psychological help and delicate care from my parents helped him realise that he was not alone and that he had a family. A different family. That's how we lived with Jaden. Everyone was in their own world. We hardly even saw each other. Maybe only at the dinner table and in the halls of our house, where our communication was narrowed to hellos if I was in a good mood. Anyway, it seemed that he treated me coldly and kept his distance, and this never bothered me. Everything, well, not everything, but a lot changed when I enrolled in the same school as Jaden. Our school was small, so now we crossed paths much more frequently than at home. Well, you know, in school hallways, at neighbouring tables, in the cafeteria. We even shared some classes now. Jaden was only 1 year older than me, so it turned out we had mutual friends, and some of the girls I knew dated guys from Jaden's group. In other words, we now had a pretty tight social group. And you know, I saw another Jaden, not the one I saw at home. I thought he was a gloomy, non-talkative, boring teenager, but it turned out that he was popular at school. I could not even imagine that he had so many friends. Moreover, he was even well respected at school. I saw firsthand several times how he protected some outsiders from bullying. Jaden was a tall and physically fit guy, so the bullies retreated just from his convincing talk with them. By the way, I always thought that my stepbrother was playing basketball, just because he had nothing else to do. But no, it turned out that Jaden was one of the top basketball players on our school team, and he possibly had a future in the sport. If only he didn't prefer science. Oh yes, I always thought that Jaden wasn't as smart as I was, and I could not even imagine that last year my stepbrother got second best in the school science contest. Only several points kept his science project from winning. So, after 4 years of living in the same house, I suddenly realised that my stepbrother was very, very cool. I was puzzled and for some reason ashamed. I started to think about all the moments when Jaden and I did something together, talked, hung out together, spent time with our now mutual parents. I could count all of these moments on one hand, but more often I either did not notice Jaden or tried to hurt him in some way. In other words, I behaved like an idiot. I decided to change everything. I wanted to establish a good relationship with him, maybe to even become friends and hang out together. But you know what? Now Jaden had started to ignore me. I tried to chat with him at home and at school, and even tried to hang out with his friends. But at best, he reacted with a couple of empty words. I sincerely could not understand why Jaden was so cold with me, but I was even more confused about why it made me so angry, and I became really angry. So I started a whole adventure in order to melt this piece of ice that he put between us. Our school had organised an outdoor event, a short camping trip to the nearest national park. You know, nothing special, just one of those events that would help to get teenagers off the internet and force them to breathe some fresh air. It sounded terribly boring, but I thought I could use this event to find a moment and take Jaden for a heart-to-heart walk. And then I would pretend that I twisted my ankle, and Jaden, the protector of the weak, simply couldn't remain indifferent. It sounded like a plan, and at the beginning it all went well. I managed to take my stepbrother for a walk, apart from our schoolmates. But I did not scout out the area properly. I was stupid enough to take a walk alongside a deep ravine. When I was ready to play the twisted ankle scenario, I slipped up and fell down. I got really hurt when I was sliding down the ravine. Jaden rushed after me. He actually seemed really worried about me. But I could not even think about that in the moment. I was trying too hard not to cry from really hurting myself. Jaden made sure that I did not break anything, and then took me in his arms and carried me back to the camp. At that moment, I forgot all about the bruises and scratches, because I suddenly noticed how amazingly handsome he was. This time it did not take too long for me to realise something. I was in love with my stepbrother. Oh my God. You know, after a few days, I just told him everything, because Now his coldness seemed particularly unbearable. As you might have guessed, Jaden was very, very surprised. But I was even more surprised to learn that he had been in love with me from early childhood. When we were kids, he would do his best to catch the eye of the blonde neighbour girl, who he liked so much, but I hated him. And when he became a part of our life, he gave up the very thought of having any feelings for me. I became his sister. Furthermore, a sister who hated him. Well, I did not tell Jaden that one thing that I have told you already, and that I'm going to say one more time, how stupid I was. We talked for a long time about the prospect of being together, and we did not find any reasons why we couldn't. We are mature enough to start dating, we're not related by blood, and we are even nothing alike. He's black and I'm a blonde girl with Norwegian roots, and well, I think we could make a beautiful couple. The next day we told our parents everything. Of course, they were a little bit shocked. They had gotten used to thinking of Jaden as their son, but they really had nothing to object to. All of this was a little bit strange. But there are many strange things happening in this strange life. Well, this is the end of my story. Jaden and I started to go out together, but we did not have time to tell anyone at school about this. But I think it should be clear to everyone just by looking at us. Now it's your turn to reveal something that is hard to share. It's exciting and at the same time very interesting. And don't forget to like and subscribe.